So, thanks for joining me here in part 2. This video is where we talk about tactics, we talk about weapons that we can use to fight back against those eating disorders. So let's launch straight into this. Think back to the first video where we were talking about how eating disorder behaviors often manifest themselves as a way to alleviate negative emotion. So, one of the techniques we can use is to find alternate avenues and channels through which to alleviate that negative emotion. So, I've got a couple of examples. First one is adult colouring books. Now, don't laugh, this is very therapeutic. It stimulates creativity through colouring they're often quite elaborate pictures in colouring books, so you have to be really creative in how you use your colours and how you want to frame the picture. It's also a great way to be mindful, to practice mindfulness, to shift aside the negativity of the past, the worry about the future, and just hone in on the present moment and get really engaged in the acts that you're doing. This colouring can also be a stimulus for flow states. Flow states are something that I love. I've talked about that in another video, so I won't elaborate on that too much here. But essentially, colouring books give you a way to hone in on a single activity and compartmentalise and shift away the negative experiences and stresses of the day. So tip number 1, colouring books. Tip number 2, we were talking about mindfulness there, so that leads very nicely into this technique, which is mindfulness and meditation. I'm a huge advocate of both these things. I think they're effective for all forms of stress relief and emotional wellness, but they can be very useful for eating disorders in particular. Now, the key to mindfulness and meditation is the power of the breath. You see, when you are breathing, when you focus on the breath and the inhalation and exhalation, and you slow down that breathing and you make it more pronounced and elongated, you will shift your body from a flight or fight response, where we're angry, we're stressed, we're uptight, to a rest and digest condition, whereby we will be relaxed, calm, and able to think more clearly. So it's all in the power of the breath. I'd recommend finding a YouTube channel that does guided meditations, particularly those that focus on the breath, and just sit and focus on the inhalation and exhalation. And you can do this anywhere, and you don't have to sit there for an hour going into a deep Buddha trance-like state. This is just something you can do for a couple of minutes before you face a stressful situation. You can slow the emotions and bring them down and bring them to a state where you feel more relaxed. So that's tip number 2, mindfulness and meditation. Tip number 3 is pets and animals. Yes, pet therapy is awesome. When I was at university, me and my flatmates had a flat cat, and I would attest to the value that he brought to my emotional wellness. When you've come in from a long, hard day, you've been stressed out, you've been at classes, tutorials, workshops, you've got that essay that's due all too soon, having some time to snuggle up with the cat, to have that unconditional love, is so good for your emotional well-being. Now, you may not be in a situation where you either want or can have a pet of that size, a cat or a dog, even just something like a guinea pig or even just some goldfish. Having something that is able to give you some kind of response, even if it's just the goldfish coming into the tank and showing that they're pleased that you're here and pleased that you're feeding them, that can do wonders for your emotional well-being. Also, you can find something like a cat cafe. I went to a cat cafe in Edinburgh. It was awesome. You pay £7 and you go in for an hour and you just get to play with and stroke the cats for that entire hour, and that is amazing for stress relief and calm. £7, not a whole lot of money. That's 1 hour of work, but that can really help to slow you down, chill you out, and calm you. So that's tip number 3, pets and pet therapy. So, what else can you do to combat the different facets of an eating disorder? So I mentioned in the first video how my eating disorder was triggered by me being beaten up by a group of guys. Now, I didn't realize that until about 2.5, 3 years after it actually happened, when I did a life story exercise where I went back and wrote about the experiences that had happened throughout my entire life. All of the things that I talk about in these videos, my parents' divorce, binge eating at 13, my eating disorder, my depression, I only got that realization and perspective from doing this life story exercise. And it was as I wrote about all these things and noticed how things progressed and the way things linked and what built on top of the other, that I realized that the key moment was that beating up, was that assault. So I would recommend that you guys also do a life story exercise where you just go back and break it into 5-year chunks from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, etc. Write about what happened during those years and what you can remember the key events being, and start to see if there's a chain, if there's a single point that you can bring it back to that started everything going. Now, obviously there'll be, well, not obviously, often there will be more than one contributing factor, but there will be something that got the ball rolling and then slowly other things came in and contributed to it. Now, the reason this is so good is with that understanding and clarity that it gives you. If you know the origins and the foundations of where your eating disorder comes from, you can identify that underlying issue. For example, it might be control, like we talked about in the last video. And if you know what the underlying issue is, then you can begin to make sure that you reduce the amount of time or exposure to that issue you will have. And you can also adapt and find other methods through which to address that underlying issue. So, technique number 2, well, part number 2, we did 3 techniques for the last part. This second strategy, life story, journal, write about your thoughts and feelings, and you will learn so much. Now, we also talked about in the video your ED voice, Ed. Now, this strategy is to get back at Ed, to stop that taking over and being in control and whisper, 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 whisper all the time. So, this strategy is to help you to talk back to Ed. Now, ideally, and if you're comfortable and you have the privacy to do so, do this out loud. Have an argument with Ed, and having that vocalization, the body language, really getting into it, expressing that resistance and having that confrontation will be excellent for reasserting control. And Ed will, if you imagine him as a person, will be a little surprised, a little affronted, because he's not used to you fighting back. Now, I appreciate that we do not all have the privacy in which to have arguments with our inner self. So another technique you can use, again we're going back to the writing, is to have a journal where you write out your arguments with Ed. You write out what he's telling you to do. Oh, don't put so much on your plate. Oh, you're getting fat. Oh, go and stuff that cake into your mouth. Oh, I think you need to go and compensate for what you've just eaten. Write down what he's saying to you and write down responses, write down arguments. Confront and challenge Ed through the pen and paper. And this can be a great alternative method for overcoming Ed's power over you, and gives you the privacy in which to combat your eating disorder. I know a lot of people with mental health conditions in general are very private and reserved, and they try to hide it from people. So this gives you a great technique that you can use in your own time, in your own space, to fight back. So guys, I hope these techniques have helped you. I hope you can find one that you start to implement, because I know that when I was going through my struggles, I wish I'd had someone giving this video to me and just giving me a little technique, a little tactic, something that I could use to make me feel a little better about life. So guys, I look forward to speaking to you next week. Next week's videos are going to be on depression. But until then, love inwardly and shine outwardly.